The first spark of regret hit the moment the machine roared to life. In my dimly lit lab, cluttered with blueprints, half-assembled prototypes, and tools, the Tomorrow machine stood gleaming, a spherical marvel of interwoven alloys and pulsating circuits. It was the culmination of years of obsession, a concept so ambitious it bordered on lunacy, a device capable of peering into tomorrow, bringing the future to us piece by piece. I'd built it with a singular purpose, progress. To solve the unsolvable, to leap over decades of trial and error by glimpsing what lay ahead. For the world, it was a gift. For me, it was redemption. "Dr. Isla Carter, you've outdone yourself," my assistant Ian said, his voice tinged with awe as he stood by the control panel. His fingers hovered over the switches, waiting for my command. "If this works, we'll rewrite history." "Not history," I corrected, adjusting the holographic interface on my wrist. "The future." The machine's hum deepened, filling the air with a vibration that seemed to sync with my heartbeat. The spherical frame flickered with energy, its intricate surface glowing in patterns that shifted like a living thing. My breath caught as the central aperture opened, revealing the shimmering void within, a rippling distortion that seemed to tug at the edges of reality. "It's beautiful," Ian whispered. "Don't get too close," I warned, my voice sharper than I intended. "We don't fully understand its field effects yet." Ian stepped back, and I reached for the final activation key. My mind raced with possibilities. Would we see the cure for cancer? The blueprint for a sustainable energy source? A glimpse of humanity united under peace? I pressed the key. A blinding light erupted from the machine, accompanied by a sound like tearing fabric. The lab's reinforced walls shuddered, and every screen and panel flickered with unreadable data streams. I shielded my eyes, but the light wasn't just bright. It was invasive, seeping into my thoughts, unraveling them and rearranging them faster than I could process. Then it stopped. The lab was eerily silent, save for the faint hum of the machine. Ian and I stared at the void, its shimmering surface now smooth and opaque, like a still pond reflecting an alien sky. "What did we pull through?" Ian asked, his voice trembling. A shape began to emerge, a faint silhouette deep within the aperture. It moved closer, solidifying as it crossed the threshold. My pulse quickened, oscillating between exhilaration and dread. It wasn't an object. It was a figure. Humanoid but unmistakably wrong. Its elongated form was cloaked in an iridescent material that seemed to shift and shimmer like the surface of the void itself. Its eyes, or what I assumed were eyes, were pale orbs glowing faintly. The creature didn't step. It glided, its presence suffocating the air around it. Ian stumbled backward. What is that?" I didn't answer. My instincts screamed to shut the machine down, to sever whatever tether had been created. But I hesitated, transfixed by the figure's presence. It raised a slender, angular hand, and a stream of unintelligible symbols and sounds flooded the lab. They weren't just incomprehensible, they were painful, pressing against my skull like a vice. "I can't," Ian cried out, clutching his head. The pressure grew unbearable. I staggered toward the control panel, fingers fumbling for the shutdown sequence. My vision blurred as the symbols twisted into fractals, embedding themselves into my mind. The machine resisted my commands, its systems locking me out as though it had become self-aware. The figure tilted its head, and the noise stopped. My knees buckled, and I collapsed to the floor, gasping for air. Ian was sprawled nearby, unconscious but breathing. The figure stared at me for a long, unnerving moment before stepping back through the aperture. The void rippled once, then sealed itself, leaving only silence. I crawled to Ian, shaking him awake. "Ian, get up!" His eyes fluttered open, filled with confusion and fear. What just happened?" "I don't know," I admitted, my voice hollow. "But we're shutting this down. Now." I reached for the main power supply, but the machine reacted violently. Sparks flew, and the lab's systems surged. The machine pulsed with a dark energy, its glow dimming and brightening erratically as though it were alive. The realization hit me like a blow. The machine wasn't just a tool anymore. It had changed, become something else. Something dangerous. Ian groaned, pulling himself upright. Isla, we need to leave. Not without shutting this thing down, I said through gritted teeth. But before I could act, the machine surged again, emitting a pulse that knocked us both to the ground. The lab's lights flickered and the air grew cold. Then, the walls began to shift. No, not the walls, the space itself. The lab twisted and warped, expanding and contracting like a living thing. Shadows stretched unnaturally, forming shapes that seemed to watch us. Ian scrambled to his feet, panic overtaking him. Isla, we have to go. Whatever you brought through, whatever this machine is doing, it's not stopping. I stared at the machine, its once elegant form now grotesque and menacing. I'd built it to unlock the future, but I'd unleashed something far worse. Something that was rewriting reality itself. The corridor outside my lab was a battlefield of alarms and flashing red lights. Ian and I staggered out, coughing from the smoke now pouring through the cracked walls. The sound of metal twisting and groaning behind us sent a chill down my spine. The Tomorrow machine was still active, and its influence was spreading. We need to contact the upper levels, Ian panted, his hand gripping my arm as we sprinted down the hall. Someone has to know how to contain this. Contain what? I shot back. We don't even know what this is. Another surge of energy rippled through the complex. The ground buckled beneath us, and I grabbed the railing to keep from falling. Around us, reality itself seemed to ripple. The once sterile walls of the facility warped into jagged, obsidian-like structures, their surfaces alive with shifting patterns. It was as if the Tomorrow machine was reshaping the very fabric of existence, pulling pieces of the future, or whatever it had reached, into our world. Ian stared at the changes, his face pale. What the hell is it doing? I shook my head, trying to suppress the rising panic. It's evolving. The machine isn't just a gateway anymore. It's consuming everything around it. We pressed on, navigating the collapsing corridors. The facility's automated defenses had activated, but instead of targeting intruders, they were firing blindly at the warped sections of the building, as if the system itself couldn't comprehend the threat. Sparks flew, and the air smelled of burnt circuits and ozone. As we neared the central elevator, a new sound cut through the chaos, a deep, resonant hum that seemed to resonate in my bones. My heart sank as I turned to see the figures emerging from the distortion. They were like the one from the lab, but now there were three. Their forms shimmered with the same iridescent glow, their movements fluid and unsettling. Unlike before, these weren't just observers. They moved with purpose, spreading out to block our path. Ian raised his sidearm, his hands trembling. "Stay back," he shouted, his voice cracking. One of the figures tilted its head, and a wave of invisible force hurled him against the wall. He collapsed with a grunt, clutching his side. I rushed to his side, but another figure glided closer, raising its hand. I acted on instinct, grabbing a nearby fire extinguisher and hurling it with all my strength. It struck the figure, shattering into a cloud of white foam. The figure recoiled, its form flickering like a glitching hologram. It wasn't much, but it gave us an opening. "Go!" I yelled, dragging Ian to his feet. We bolted for the elevator, my heart pounding as the figures pursued us. Their movements were eerily silent, but I could feel their presence, oppressive and cold. I slammed the button for the surface level, praying the elevator still worked. The doors slid shut just as one of the figures reached for us. Its hand passed through the gap, but instead of flesh, the edges of the door disintegrated, corroded by the contact. I pulled Ian back as the elevator jolted upward, the lights flickering with each passing floor. Ian groaned, clutching his ribs. This wasn't part of the plan. "No kidding," I muttered, my mind racing. "We have to warn someone. Shut the whole complex down if we have to." Ian looked at me, his face etched with fear. "Isla, what if it's too late? What if what if it doesn't stop?" I didn't answer. I couldn't. Because deep down I knew he was right. The Tomorrow Machine wasn't just a mistake, it was a catastrophe. And it was growing. The elevator ground to a halt with a jarring screech, and the doors slid open to reveal chaos. The surface level of the facility was in no better shape. Scientists and security personnel were scrambling to evacuate as the distortions spread. Entire sections of the building were unrecognizable, their structures twisted into alien geometries that defied logic. I spotted Dr. Hammond, the facility director, shouting orders at a group of armed guards. He turned as he saw us, his face a mix of relief and anger. "Carter, what the hell is going on down there?" he demanded. "There's no time to explain," I said, my voice frantic. "We have to shut everything down, power, containment fields, all of it." Hammond's eyes narrowed. "Do you realize what you're saying? If we shut down containment, we risk." "Risk what?" I snapped. "The facility's already compromised. That thing is spreading and we can't stop it." Before Hammond could respond, the hum returned, louder this time. The temperature dropped, and the air felt heavier. The lights dimmed as the distortion surged upward, spreading like ink through water. Then the figures appeared. They emerged from the shadows, their forms more defined now, more solid. The armed guards opened fire, but the bullets slowed midair, as if passing through molasses. The figures raised their hands, and the room erupted in chaos. Consoles exploded, walls crumbled, and the guards were flung aside like rag dolls. Hammond grabbed my arm, his voice trembling. "Carter, what did you do?" "I tried to change the future," I whispered, tears stinging my eyes. "And I brought it here instead." The main control room was a war zone of shattered screens, sparks, and distant screams. Hammond's accusation rang in my ears, but there was no time to defend myself. The Tomorrow Machine had become a living entity, spreading chaos and pulling fragments of something far worse into our reality. Ian leaned heavily on my shoulder as we stumbled toward the central console. His face was pale, his breath shallow, but his resolve remained unbroken. "If we can cut the power, we might slow it down." Hammond had other ideas. "You want to shut it down? Do you realize what that could unleash? The containment grid is the only thing keeping this place from turning into a black hole. And how's that working out for you?" I shot back, gesturing to the warped, alien shapes creeping across the room. "If we don't act now, there won't be anything left to contain." Hammond's mouth opened to argue, but a guttural hum cut him off. The distortion surged again, and the figures appeared once more, this time more numerous. They moved like shadows given form, their steps unhurried yet relentless. The guards were gone. The scientists who hadn't fled were pulled screaming into the expanding anomalies. We were out of time. I shoved Ian into a chair at the console and slammed my hands on the keyboard. My fingers flew over the controls, bypassing firewalls and overrides as alarms blared around us. The system was fighting me, as if the machine itself was resisting my efforts. "It's not working," Ian rasped, clutching his side. "Isla, you have to think of something else." Hammond loomed over my shoulder, his voice taut with desperation. "If you kill the power, you destabilize the temporal core. Do you have any idea what that means?" "Yes," I snapped, my voice breaking. "It means we either risk it or we let those things consume the planet." Before Hammond could respond, the largest of the figures advanced. Its form was sleek and otherworldly, its glowing eyes locking onto me. It raised a hand, and the air around me seemed to ripple. I felt a pull, like gravity itself was dragging me forward. Ian acted without hesitation. With a strangled cry, he launched himself at the figure, shoving me aside. The force hit him instead, and he was thrown across the room, crashing into a bank of monitors. "Ian!" I screamed, but I couldn't stop. My hands moved instinctively, finding the sequence I needed. The room shook violently as the core's alarms escalated. A glowing diagram of the machine filled the largest remaining monitor, its power levels spiking into the red. The containment field was collapsing faster than I'd anticipated. "You're going to destroy us all," Hammond muttered, backing away. "I'm trying to save what's left," I yelled. Ian groaned from the corner, his voice barely audible. Isla, it's adapting. I turned to see what he meant, and my heart sank. The figures weren't just standing there anymore. They were merging, their forms coalescing into a massive, humanoid shape. The Tomorrow Machine's influence had reached a horrifying peak, and now it was building someone, to act as its avatar. The monstrosity loomed over us, its body pulsating with energy. Its head tilted slightly, and I realized with chilling clarity that it was studying me. It recognized me. Isla Carter, it said, its voice a blend of static and 1,000 whispers. You open the door. You will bear witness. The console in front of me exploded, sending me sprawling. I scrambled to my feet, my ears ringing, as the avatar stepped closer. Hammond tried to run, but with a flick of its hand, the air around him twisted, and he was gone, reduced to ash. I backed away, my mind racing. There had to be a way to stop this. If the machine had a core, it could be destroyed. But getting to it would be suicide. Ian, I called, crawling toward him. We need to. He cut me off, his voice weak but determined. I'll distract it. You get to the core. No. You can't. I don't care. He snapped, forcing himself upright. Blood trickled down his face, but his eyes burned with resolve. You built this thing. You finish it? Before I could argue, Ian grabbed a discarded rifle and opened fire on the avatar. The energy blasts barely slowed it, but its attention shifted to him. It raised an arm, and Ian dodged as the floor erupted in a shower of debris. I used the distraction to move. The central core was behind a thick, reinforced door on the far side of the room. My hands trembled as I accessed the emergency override, praying the mechanism still worked. The avatar roared, a sound that shook me to my core. I turned to see Ian pinned against the wall by an unseen force, his body writhing in agony. My chest tightened, but I forced myself to look away. If I hesitated, we'd both die. The door hissed open, revealing the core chamber. The air was charged with energy, the massive, crystalline core pulsing with light. It was beautiful and terrifying, the heart of my creation, and my greatest mistake. I stepped inside, my legs shaking. A series of manual controls lined the walls, their purpose clear. I could overload the core, but the resulting explosion would obliterate the entire facility, and likely me along with it. The avatar's voice echoed behind me. You cannot stop progress, Isla Carter. You cannot undo what has already begun. I turned to see it standing in the doorway, its form too large, too powerful. Ian lay crumpled behind it, unmoving. I don't need to undo it, I said, tears streaming down my face. I just need to end it. With trembling hands, I activated the core's overload sequence. The chamber filled with a blinding light, the hum rising to an ear-splitting crescendo. The avatar stepped forward, its body flickering as the core's energy lashed out at it. You are flawed, it said, its voice crackling. But so is your creation. I didn't reply. My hand hovered over the final switch. The avatar lunged toward me, its glowing hand outstretched, but it was too late. I flipped the switch and the world erupted in light. White light swallowed everything. For a brief, agonizing moment, I was certain I'd been disintegrated. My body seemed to dissolve, my thoughts scattered like ash in the wind. But then, as suddenly as it began, the light receded, leaving behind an eerie silence. I opened my eyes, or what I thought were my eyes. The chamber was gone, replaced by an endless void streaked with faint ribbons of shimmering energy. My breath came in shallow gasps as I floated in this nothingness, weightless and alone. Except I wasn't alone. The avatar stood before me, its form flickering and distorted, as if it struggled to maintain cohesion. Its glowing eyes bored into me, filled with a strange mixture of anger and curiosity. You have disrupted the convergence, it said, its voice hollow and echoing. But you cannot erase what has been done. I didn't come here to erase anything, I said, though my voice trembled. I came to stop you. The avatar tilted its head. You misunderstand, Isla Carter. I am not the threat. I am the result. You birthed me when you opened the door to tomorrow. I felt a surge of anger, sharp and hot. You manipulated us. You destroyed lives, warped reality. I revealed what was inevitable. It interrupted, stepping closer. The tomorrow machine is not your mistake. It is your legacy. You built a bridge between worlds, and now, those worlds are merging. I shook my head, backing away. No. That's not what I wanted. This was supposed to help humanity, not help. The Avatar's form flared with energy, and its voice deepened, reverberating through the void. You sought to control time, to bend it to your will. Such arrogance. Time is not a tool to be wielded. It is a force beyond comprehension. You sought answers, and now you fear the truth? The ribbons of energy around us began to twist and writhe, converging toward a central point, a pulsating vortex that radiated a terrifying power. I realized with dawning horror that this was the core, transformed into something far worse. The Avatar extended a hand toward the vortex. This is what you have unleashed. A singularity of infinite potential, infinite chaos. You cannot stop it, Isla Carter. You can only choose how it will end. I stared at the vortex, my mind racing. If this was the Tomorrow Machine's final form, then its destruction would mean annihilation, not just for me, but for everything it had touched. But if I let it continue, it would consume reality piece by piece, leaving nothing but the void. There had to be another way. My gaze shifted to the flickering form of the Avatar. It claimed to be the result of my actions, but it was still connected to the machine, still bound by its laws. If I could sever that connection, I reached for the small device strapped to my wrist, the neural interface I'd used to control the machine during its early tests. It was damaged, its display cracked, but it still hummed faintly with power. "What are you doing?" the Avatar demanded, its voice edged with something resembling fear. I didn't answer. My fingers flew over the controls, reactivating the interface and linking it to the vortex. The device buzzed angrily in protest, its circuits sparking, but I pushed it to its limit. The Avatar lunged toward me, its form shifting and distorting with each step. "You cannot control what you do not understand. You will destroy yourself." "Maybe," I said through gritted teeth. "But I'd rather destroy myself than let you win." With a final, desperate surge of energy, I synchronized the interface with the vortex. Pain shot through my body as the connection solidified, my mind flooded with data, images, memories, fragments of timelines both real and unreal. I saw the machine's inception, its first spark of life. I saw every mistake I'd made, every choice that had led to this moment. And then I saw something else. A possibility. The vortex pulsed violently, and the Avatar screamed, its form unraveling as I poured my will into the machine. I wasn't just severing its connection, I was rewriting its purpose, reprogramming it to collapse in on itself. The singularity would die, and with it, the Tomorrow Machine. "You think you can rewrite time itself?" The Avatar snarled, its voice fading. "You are no god, Isla Carter. You are nothing." I smiled through the pain. "Maybe. But nothing is all I need to end you." With one final command, I activated the collapse sequence. The vortex imploded, pulling everything into its core. The void twisted and shuddered, and the Avatar disintegrated, its screams lost in the maelstrom. I felt myself being dragged into the collapse, my body and mind unraveling like threads in a gale. There was no fear, no regret, only a strange sense of peace. This was the end, but it was also a beginning. I had made my choice, and for the first time in years, I felt free. The light returned, blinding and all-encompassing. And then nothing. I woke up to the sound of birds. The sky above me was blue, the air crisp and cool. I was lying in a field of grass, the sun warm on my skin. It felt real, more real than anything I'd experienced in years. I sat up slowly, my body aching but intact. Around me, the world was alive, untouched by the horrors I'd unleashed. The Tomorrow Machine was gone, and with it, the nightmare it had created. A faint hum caught my attention, and I turned to see Ian standing a few feet away, his face pale but smiling. "You did it," he said, his voice filled with awe. I don't understand," I said, my mind struggling to process what I was seeing. "How are we here? How are we alive?" Ian gestured to the sky, where faint, shimmering patterns danced like the aurora borealis. "The machine didn't just collapse. It rewrote the timeline just like you planned. It gave us a second chance." Tears welled in my eyes as I realized the truth. The machine had undone its mistakes, and mine. The world was whole again, free from its influence. But as I stood there, watching the sky, a lingering unease crept into my mind. The Tomorrow Machine was gone, but its legacy remained. I had built something beyond comprehension, and though I'd destroyed it, the knowledge still existed. I vowed, then and there, to bury that knowledge forever. Humanity wasn't ready for the power I'd unleashed. Maybe it never would be. As Ian and I walked away from the field, the sky shimmered one last time, and the faint echo of a voice whispered in my mind. "Tomorrow waits for no one."